I'm Dr. Kathleen Olive. Welcome to Limelight Arts Travel's Art Podcast, A Closer Look. In this episode, I'm joined by art historian and specialist guide Freya Middleton. A native of Florence for more than 20 years, today Freya takes us beyond her own city to its near neighbour and great rival, Siena. Duccio di Boninsegna was one of Siena's greatest artists, taking the much-loved, otherworldly and luxurious style of Byzantium and adapting it to local interests in naturalism, in innovative depictions of objects in space, and in the place of humans in God's world. In his Maestà, or Madonna in Majesty, made for Siena Cathedral, Duccio sets the standard for generations of artists who will follow him, such as Simone Martini and the Lorenzetti brothers. But, as Freya explains, he also leaves behind a legacy that will see him ranked alongside giants such as Cimabue and Giotto. Hi, Freya Middleton.
Oh, good morning. Hi, Kathleen.
Thank you so much, Freya, for coming in again to have a chat with us about a great Italian work of art. Which work have you chosen for us today?
Oh, the phenomenal Maestà, Madonna in Majesty, by Duccio di Boninsegna from Siena. It's quite simply phenomenal. And so it is, I wish it was in Florence where I am, because then I would be able to see it a little more often. But thankfully for the Sienese, it is still in Siena.
Phenomenal. I mean, this is a phenomenon, this work. And for people who aren't familiar with it, we're talking about a really large work with multiple panels, a polyptych, and it's not just one-sided, is it?
No. And so it is double-sided. And as you said, I mean, it is huge. It's over 4 meters high, tall, which is just incredible. So of course, what you have to immediately imagine this enormous, it's the largest wooden altarpiece thus far in the medieval world. And imagine it on the high altar of the Cathedral of Siena. And it was commissioned to Duccio di Boninsegna by the OPA, or the Opera del Duomo. So again, that board that was made up of both secular and religious men that looked after and voted on the changes and the budget for the beautification and the maintenance of the cathedral complex. And they commissioned in 1308. And we know this, by the way, because this is fabulous, that the document still exists. The contract commissioning Duccio di Boninsegna in 1308 to create this unbelievable undertaking of this huge double-sided, numerous, with so many different episodes going on, altarpiece. And it took him 3 years. He finished it in June of 1311. And can you believe that the city of Siena called the day that they were going to take this huge altarpiece from Duccio's workshop to the cathedral? They called it a public holiday. And so all the workshops are closed, and can you imagine all the people lining the streets watching as this solemn procession, of this huge altarpiece making its way from Duccio's workshop through the streets of Siena up to the cathedral, where then it stayed from 1311 to 1506, to be precise. And so it really, I think this image for me really underlines how this work is almost equally religious as it is secular, as it is an important, patriotic representation of the city. The city of Siena, the Republic of Siena, is devoted to the Virgin Mary. I know most cities were in this period. However, Siena is particularly, has this nurses and nurtures still today, this devotion to the to the Virgin Mary. And so indeed, the front part of this altarpiece, the main huge section of the altarpiece is dedicated to, as the name tells us, the Maesta, the Madonna, the Queen of Heaven, the Madonna shown in majesty, i.e. as the Queen of Heaven, seated on her throne, carrying Christ. And she's she's surrounded by angels and saints, and the kneeling in the front, gazing lovingly to her are the 4 patron saints of Siena. And so this altarpiece, therefore, what I've just described with the Madonna and Majesty, who would have seen this? Well, this was the part that the people who entered, and the everyman who entered in the cathedral would have seen. And above her, so imagine, and she's shown huge. She's enormous indeed, because we're in the early 1300s. We're in the medieval hierarchy of size. So it's not in the Renaissance concept of proportion, where people are shown proportionately to their surroundings. But here it's shown in that symbolic rendering, where the bigger things are, the more important they are. This painting is about the Virgin Mary. This painting is about the greatest intercessor for our soul. So here she's shown huge in relation to the people who are surrounding her. Now, we've got below, there was the wonderful episodes, the predella scenes, and they are scenes of the Virgin Mary's life. And then above, there are numerous saints shown in little niches. And then the pinnacle scenes are also the last episodes of the Virgin Mary's life. The other side, the back side of this huge altarpiece, doesn't have a central large scene. Instead, there are 26 individual smaller episodes with showing the Passion of Christ, starting with the entry into Jerusalem. This back part mirrors exactly what we've just been talking about. The back section also has predella scenes showing the infancy of Christ, and above, the pinnacle scenes shows apparitions and miracles of Christ after his death. So let's say the front is dedicated to the Virgin Mary, the great intercessor for our soul, and the back side shows the episodes of the life of Christ. And so who would have seen the back side of this huge altarpiece? Well, of course, the people in the choir, the religious men. And so the larger image is seen by people all the way back in the church, and the more intricate little episodes would have been seen by people closer up, the men of cloth. And so what happened after 1506? Well, they decided to move the huge painting to another smaller space in the cathedral. And then, unfortunately, in the late 1700s and 1770s, it was dismembered. We lost the frame. So where you see the majority of this altarpiece pieced back together now in the Museum of the Cathedral in Siena, you're seeing it, unfortunately. It's a miracle that we have as many pieces as we do have, because in the 1770s, dismembered, individual parts sold off. You find some of these scenes, some of the predella scenes, some of the pinnacle scenes scattered all over the world in leading museums, such as there's a small one in the Frick, there's one in the National Gallery of in Washington, for example. But unfortunately, we don't have all of these pieces. Some of them have lost, some of them maybe still are in existence, but we just don't know where they are. But also, it is a miracle that they've managed to get back as many of the pieces as we do have in Siena and piece it together. So it does give a really good idea, but we don't have any of the frame at all. So when you do look at this, you must imagine that it would have been, therefore, delineated various different parts with, fabulous wood work and gold gilding.
Freya, when I look at this work on both its sides, on its double sides, I'm really struck by the luxury of the materials. At first blush, I look at it and I see gold. I see a very deep blue, which I'm assuming is often here being incorporating the use of lapis lazuli. I see red, which is an expensive pigment. It's clearly a very expensive luxury item. The Sienese are really happy with it. They declare that public holiday. And yet Duccio is maybe an artist that people are less familiar with. He's maybe not a name that is on the tip of the tongue for all lovers of Italian art. So how would you place him for us in the trajectory of Sienese or indeed Italian art? What's his great contribution?
Oh, what a great question. And indeed, that luxury, I mean, the cloth, the Virgin is seated on this throne, as we mentioned. And the throne is also depicted like this kind of open book. I love how it splays out, which really kind of shows us this, the woman in her beautifully rendered lapis lazuli, which, by the way, was actually written into the contract, indeed, that they were supplying this extraordinarily expensive material for Duccio to use, which was imported from Afghanistan, and it was equally, if not more, costly than gold itself. The cloth on which she sits, is so beautifully rendered that you reach out and touch the silk, but then you pull your hand back because indeed you know that it's not something that a mere mortal should indeed touch. So that is very well pointed out. And what Duccio does so beautifully, he is late 12, early 1300s. He's this first great master. So really kind of the equivalent of Cimabue and Giotto, what's going on in Florence. And he is this great master who retains some of the elegance, a lot of the elegance, and this wonderful sense of importance and almost an ecstatic sense of regality from the Byzantine period, but meshes it with just enough sense of naturalism so you get a sense of warmth in his work, which softens the blow of that really hieratic and static Byzantine icon. So really what Duccio introduces to Siena is, he retains the regality and the refinement from the Byzantine icon, but starts to soften it and warm it with human expression. And this really is something that indeed someone like Simone Martini, who possibly might have been an assistant in Duccio's workshop when he was working on this magnificent work, is exactly the lasting element that he'll give the Sienese school.
Freya Middleton, thank you so much for introducing us to this beautiful work of art.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Kathleen.
You've been listening to Limelight Arts Travels podcast, A Closer Look. It was recorded on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and we acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of this land and their elders past and present.